The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff will soon be asked to reveal what she knew and when about Beijing's alleged election interference. The Prime Minister's office announced that Katie Telford agreed to testify just hours before a vote on a Conservative motion to compel her to appear. The NDP threatened to side with the Conservatives on that vote. So where does this leave the relationship between the Liberal government and the opposition party, keeping them in power? Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the New Democratic Party. I caught up with him this afternoon on Parliament Hill. Jagmeet Singh, thanks for the time.
My pleasure.
I've been speaking with some Liberals and Conservatives over the past couple of days, and they told me that things got pretty tense in the conversation about how you were going to vote yesterday and the ultimatum to ultimately allow Katie Telford to come testify at committee. How tense did things get with the Liberals?
Well, we laid an ultimatum. We wanted to make it very clear that they had to stop the obstruction, allow the witness to testify, or we would force them to do so.
But in your conversations with the party, did you ever get to a point where you felt your working relationship could be strained, could be damaged because of this particular issue?
Well, we want to continue to do our work to get things delivered for Canadians. Dental care is very important. That remains important. We want to be able to work to achieve that, but we also need to hold the government to account. We believe a public inquiry is the best path, but absent a public inquiry, Canadians need some questions answered. And that's the forum for it now.
Was there any point in your conversations with the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office, which I understand were quite frequent over the last several days, where you felt the confidence and supply agreement might dissolve? Was there any suggestion from the Liberals that might happen? Was there any threat from the New Democrats that you might pull out over this standoff?
I had no concern about us being able to move forward to deliver dental care and the important things, but we wanted to be very firm that Canadians deserve accountability. So we were firm. We wanted to make sure that that was known, that we were going to be firm, and that we expected the obstruction to end, and we expected the witness to be able to testify. So we made that very clear. So I was firm, but I also know that it's important for Canadians to have dental care. So I was walking a very strong line of letting them know that what needed to be done, and also wanting to continue to deliver for Canadians.
Did you ever take from your conversations with the Liberals, from the senior staff, that potentially they might end the arrangement if you didn't side with them in this standoff with the Conservative motion?
That's not my understanding of the scenario. I wanted to be very clear that we were setting the standard. We were setting the groundwork. We were setting the ultimatum that this needed to happen. If it didn't happen, we would vote with the motion. If it did happen, if the obstruction stopped, we would be able to continue.
Okay, so the obstruction has stopped. The filibuster at the Proc Committee is over, and Katie Telford is going to testify. What do you hope to hear from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff at the committee when she does testify?
The major question that Canadians have is what the Prime Minister's office knew, when they knew it, and what they did or didn't do about it when it comes to foreign interference. I still believe, again, that the best forum for these type of discussions is a public inquiry that's independent. Absent that, we're left with the committee option. But those are questions that Canadians want to know answers to, and we're going to make that happen.
You've seen the other witnesses at committee, cabinet ministers, senior advisors to the Prime Minister, senior deputy ministers who've all said there's limits to what they can say because of the Secret Information Act laws and national security considerations. How much more expansive do you think Katie Telford can be on dealing with these particular questions?
I think those are real concerns, and those are legitimate concerns. We wouldn't want to jeopardize the work of our national security forces by letting those that we're worried about, those threats to Canadian democracy and Canadian security, know how our forces operate. So there are absolutely going to be very important piece of information that should not be made public, that is very fair for those to remain confidential, and we'll be monitoring that very closely.
Right, but is there a specific question you think Katie Telford can ask that the others couldn't, given that she's bound by the same restrictions?
The concerns that Canadians have around what the Prime Minister's office knew or didn't know and what they did or didn't do with it, having someone who has the authority of the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister will provide some avenue perhaps to address that concern. Really, it's important for Canadians to know that steps are being taken, and I think this will go a long way towards letting Canadians know that this is being taken seriously.
So on the same day, we learned that the obstruction, as you call it, would end at committee and Katie Telford would testify. We get the mandate, the terms of reference for David Johnston, the special rapporteur, and the work that he is going to do. We'll know by May 23rd whether or not he's going to recommend an inquiry. How satisfied are you with the latitude or lack of latitude that the former Governor General has been given on this file?
I think the mandate does address the concerns that we've had around what the Prime Minister's office knew, didn't know, and what they did or didn't do about it. That question is included in the mandate. The reporting requirement that it has to be to the public, has to be to the opposition leaders, that's positive. It does seem to be a broad mandate. It still falls short of a public inquiry, and that still remains our position. We need a public inquiry. The mandate does include the option for the special rapporteur to call for a public inquiry. So that is promising, but it doesn't satisfy our ultimate desire or ultimate wish to restore confidence in our democracy. We need a public inquiry.
So there's certainly a consensus amongst the opposition parties of the need for a public inquiry. The Liberals say they're leaving that to David Johnston, which is delegating the Prime Minister's judgment to an outside party. If on the 23rd, David Johnston says, we don't need an inquiry, I'm satisfied, I can get the answers, I'm satisfied, I can do the work, what do you do?
We continue to push for an inquiry. We believe that really is so important. And the reason is that for me, it's not about games. And with the Conservatives, I doubt if they truly want a public inquiry. We had an opportunity to vote on one yesterday, and they knew that that vote could happen, and they purposely blocked that vote on a public inquiry in Parliament yesterday. So they're not serious about a public inquiry, because for the Conservatives, this is a game, a high stakes game. For us, it's not a game. There's other areas where we will attack the Prime Minister. I attack the Prime Minister on the fact that he's not been strong on for-profit healthcare. I believe it should be public. Right. He thinks for-profit is okay. On this point, I don't want to score points. I want to find a way to protect our democracy.
But the confidence and supply agreement covers very specific things. And at the time that you signed this agreement, the question of Chinese government-backed interference in Canadian elections wasn't on the radar in Parliament. It is now. I mean, do you get to the point where you have to reconsider the whole confidence and supply agreement if you don't get this public inquiry that you say is so fundamental for Canadians to understand the integrity of their elections?
Well, that's not a decision we're making today, but we are going to continue to ramp up pressure. We're going to continue to push for questions in the House of Commons. We're going to push with motions that a public inquiry needs to be done, and we'll wait and see if the special rapporteur announces one or not. We still believe to restore confidence, having an independent and public process is very vital, and we'll see what happens with the next steps with the special rapporteur.
But how could you continue to have confidence and offer support to a government that wouldn't look into this in a way that you're comfortable with, given the stakes, given the severity of the allegations, and given the very real probability it's going to increase and escalate over time? How could you keep supporting a government that wouldn't give you that?
Well, we don't want an election. In this case, we actually want the truth. We want a public inquiry. We want to get to what happened, how expansive it is, and how we can prevent it. That can be achieved by pushing for a public inquiry. That is not achieved by triggering an election.
Right, but they could go back to the way it worked before the confidence and supply agreement. It wouldn't necessarily trigger an election if you pulled out, right? They'd have to deal with things issue by issue. It would make life more difficult for the Liberals and create an incentive to come to the idea that a public inquiry is the right path.
Well, we don't want to give up on the importance of having dental care. We know the Liberals would not do this without us. That's not something that they were planning on doing. In fact, they had voted against it. And millions of Canadians know that this will change their life, that seniors, people living with disabilities, children 18 and under, to be able to go into a dentist or hygienist's office and have their dental care needs taken care of, that is life-changing, and that's something that we don't want to give up on.
But is that dental care more important than the integrity of Canadian democracy if that becomes a trade-off? I mean, would you be willing to allow them to go without an inquiry to preserve the dental plan?
Well, that's not the trade-off that's happening. We're asking questions in committee. We have forced the Liberal government to bring a witness to the committee that they were not willing to do. We ended a filibuster. We've ended obstruction. So we are forcing the government to be accountable with the power we have. We are using our power effectively. The Conservatives have been useless in this, and we are the ones that are actually forcing accountability, and we're going to continue to do that. So I don't think that's a false equivalency. There is no trade-off here. We're holding the government to account. We're the ones that are forcing that. And we're forcing the government to deliver for Canadians, to make a difference in their lives.
Okay, so there's a big week ahead. Just as a final point, we've got the U.S. president coming and then the budget next week. They seem committed on making progress on dental care to the next stage. There was also a signal or a declaration from the Deputy Prime Minister there will be help for people to deal with the cost of living. What do you want to see in the budget on Tuesday that will allow you to support it?
Expansion of the dental care program to be the full national program covering children 18 and under, seniors, and people living with disabilities as per our agreement, and something concrete to give people some help in this difficult time. The doubling of the GST rebate, putting more money in people's pockets, is something, there's something that we've fought for before, and we would like to see that continue. Those are some concrete things that can happen. We consider that very important and meaningful steps to help Canadians, and these are steps that we would have forced the government to do.
Okay, Jagmeet Singh, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.